All right. Good morning, Doug. Just wanted to spend some time this morning covering some of these amazing news headlines that have crossed my desk in the last few days. These are all things that we've been talking about and frankly have been predicting, but when you see them come into action, it's still kind of shocking. So let me just run through them and just get your opportunity to respond to each of them. First one having to do with vaccines and vaccine passports. So the CDC's new guidelines is that if you're fully vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask. It's really, again, causing great cognitive dissonance among, the people that are pro-science, I guess they would say these days. But Oregon came out with this idea, this change. So they said, okay, you no longer have to wear masks outside, which seems crazy they were ever requiring it. But you must be vaccinated and able to prove it if you want to go indoors maskless. And so businesses are required now to enforce this. So you have to be vaccinated and be able to prove it. What do you think about all that?
I think it's completely insane because, as we've talked about in the past, most of this COVID hysteria it's about 80% stupidity and insanity. So, God, what are the social consequences of this going to be when businesses are asked to enforce the state's idiotic laws? Maybe the business owner doesn't believe in it. Who the hell knows? I mean, it's just creating more chaos in society, creating more antagonism in society, and completely pointlessly. For what it's worth, right now, I'm in Richmond, Virginia. I've just passed through it briefly many, many years ago, and staying at a place called the Jefferson Hotel, which is kind of one of these Grand Dame hotels built during the Belle Epoque in like 1890, where everything was, real marble and real wood and, 20 and 50-foot ceilings and stuff like that. This is a marvelous hotel owned by I'm off on a different subject here, but I had to mention this because it's such a marvelous place before we get back to this. And I will tie it back to the COVID thing. So I said, this is such a marvelous hotel. I hope that Marriott or Hyatt or one of these other horrible corporations hasn't bought this place and is on point of running it into the ground, which is what they all do, homogenizing it. But it's wonderful. There's a rich couple that bought this hotel and are running it like a family business. So like this morning when I had oh God, what do you call the eggs hollandaise?
Oh, Jesus.
The English bun and
yeah,
poached eggs.
I can't remember. It would come to me, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Crazy, I just had one, but it was fantastic. I mean, the food last night, the crab cake was homemade, not shipped in from Kansas, which most of the food in the country is. I mean, everything was nice. In fact, even the ham on my eggs hollandaise, maybe that's what it actually is called, I don't know, is Virginia ham, which is a special type of ham, not the ham that you buy down at the 7-Eleven, which is tasteless, but it's fantastic. So this is one of the nice things about the Old South that still linger here. Linger, even after 150 years after the war between the states, there's still, anyway, here I am in this marvelous hotel, and it's quite nice. But relating what got me off on that is that few people here are wearing these masks. In fact, we even rode up to our room with two unrelated parties, none of whom were wearing their masks. So apparently the hysteria has broken in reasonable parts of the country. Seems that way to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing some of that too, but it does not. I think it's just going to shift a little bit. Is my worry, and I think you see this in Oregon, which is not a reasonable part of the country. Portland, especially, not a reasonable part of the country at all. But my worry is that this is essentially they're talking about an internal vaccine passport. something not to travel across state borders or national borders, but something just to get access to normal life. You have to have verification that you've been vaccinated. And so my worry is that effort expands. We've seen that in Israel. We've seen it in other places. Hopefully.
Well, and of course the Soviets had those. I mean, you had to, your papers had to be in order if you were going to be allowed to live within Moscow or Leningrad or a major city. Otherwise, you're out in the middle of the taiga, in the middle of nowhere. So, maybe it's the same type of thing.
Certainly will lead to the same type of thing, it seems. So the second headline is Janet Yellen announced an effort to set a global minimum tax rate of 15%. We've been talking about tax harmonization. That's certainly a favorite concept of Klaus Schwab in the Global Economic Forum is this tax harmonization. And shortly after she announced it, France said, "Oh, that seems like that's a good compromise." So it seems like there's a number of countries lined up already to roll out this global tax harmonization strategy. What do you think?
I think it's a nightmare. And of course, you'd expect France to be among the first supporters of it. I mean, ever since Louis XIV, it's been the most dirigiste of European countries. But that's really cute. A 15% minimum worldwide. So it means even if you live in a quiet, backward little place like St. Lucia or Vanuatu or whatever, they're going to look for your local government to take 15% to fill the pockets of local politicians. And of course, a lot of it will be shipped up to New York or Brussels to the UN or God knows what. So these people are so bold. I mean, they're feeling their oats. They're getting entirely out of control. And I'm afraid that the average whipped dog is just going to roll over on his back and wet himself. He's not going to resist it. So
I think people can't see what's coming though, Doug. I think it goes back to our conversation yesterday when we were talking about, like being in Poland as the Nazis are lining up on the border. You just can't see the tidal wave coming. And maybe it's because there's a whole bunch of different things happening at one time. It's hard to even know what to focus on. But when you add them all up,
yeah,
it doesn't end well.
No, it doesn't. I just don't know where this is all. It seems like it's coming to a head when there are more and more rules and regulations and taxes creating more and more distortions, like we were talking about yesterday, in a highly complex society. Something could give. So it's just really a bad trend that is still accelerating.
Still accelerating. It feels to me as though, we're getting, as you said, they're getting very bold. They're getting very bold at this point. And one of the things that you have been talking about for years and years, really as soon as Bitcoin kind of entered the popular vernacular, which probably way back in 2014 or so, you came up with the term FedCoin and said, ultimately the central banks will be issuing these digital currencies, and and yesterday the Fed announced, of course, we know that they've been working on this stuff for a while, but they announced that next month they'll issue a report on the issuance of FedCoin, of a central bank digital currency. Not to say it's happening next month, but they're issuing their official report, their study on it next month. So with that comes a whole control mechanism where they can monitor really what people do to a degree that's just totally impossible at this stage. Hey, my dog's barking. Sorry. Alice. All right, so apologize. My dog was barking a little bit, but anyway, it just seems like this drops this control grid that allows the government to do things like really roll out global tax harmonization that would have been very, very difficult to do without central bank digital currencies.
Klaus Schwab was absolutely right. You'll own nothing. and you'll be happy. And central bank digital currencies are part of it, because once all of your currency units are in the ether and are reflected on your cell phone, well, you really do own nothing, because they can close your personal account down at will.
Mm.
And where's your money going? So
Mm.
now this is, God, it's, sometimes I think perhaps I ought to just be oblivious to the news. I'd feel better. It'd be nice if we lived in a real world where all you have to worry about were your personal relationships, your personal finances, your personal health.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would make life much more real and much more pleasant, as opposed to having to worry about what these fools who have somehow gotten control of the world are going to be doing to you and ordering your life.
It's true. I mean, I certainly think still 90% of our time should be spent on the things that you mentioned, the things that do affect us directly, our personal relationships or health and things like that. And I know that sometimes people give us some crap for talking about all the negative stuff, but at the same time, like we talked about earlier, when we were at that conference in Mexico, people who are pretty awake, pretty on the ball, successful people, that they were just oblivious to, I think, some of the dangers that are coming. And I do hope that us by talking about it at least does make people more aware, so they can prepare a little bit, so that they can then spend most of their time focusing on again, the things that actually matter, because they sort of gotten out of they found some higher ground to avoid the tsunami that's coming.
Yeah, we don't want to depress people, but we do want to alert people. I mean, when you announce, when you talk about a coming tsunami because the water has withdrawn from the beach, yes, that depresses people, because they know the chances are high they're going to die. It scares them, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. I mean, you should do it all the more.
Right. Yeah, we're here for, well, we're hoping to give people some perspective on stuff and some information that they might not, some connections in the news that they might not, that are not obvious necessarily without the historical points of reference that you have, because the fact is, at least my generation or younger are deep victims of public education here, and they don't teach us shit, I gotta say. So it's hard to recognize some of these trends without that historical context.
Well, and talking about education, uh, I haven't actually done a study to see who past chairman of the Federal Reserve actually were, what kind of people they were, what they believed, and so forth. But let's start with Greenspan. And it's interesting, I don't know how many people are even aware of this, that Greenspan, who started this crazy trend of the Fed having investors' backs and printing up money for political reasons, Greenspan was an acolyte of Ayn Rand, who held this in contempt. And Greenspan wrote a famous essay on gold, debunking central banking and all the rest of it, in Rand's book, Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. So it started. So here you have a person that understood the intellectual foundations of gold and central banking perfectly, absolutely perfectly, and disapproved of it morally. And still, he was co-opted into the deep state. Maybe he wanted to be famous. Maybe he wanted to be accepted by the reptiles that live in Washington. And I don't know. But the most unlikely of all people started this horrible trend. And then after Greenspan, let me see if we can remember who these people were. Was Bernanke next?
Bernanke. Yep.
And who came next?
Well, I thought it was just Yellen right after that.
Yellen after that, right? It was perfectly horrible. I didn't think that she would rise from, I thought she, sunk without a trace. And now she's come back stronger than ever as
Treasury Secretary.
Treasury Secretary. and now Powell, who's a nothing, nobody bureaucrat. And this is horrible. This is completely out of control. But Yellen, and I've said before, she'd be well suited for running a Jewish delicatessen as, the grandmother and back. But God, there's just no hope, frankly.
It really is crazy. And when these guys roll out the central bank digital currencies, I really believe that they know the answers to the problems that we face. Like, I believe that they think that they can manage the economy, that if they had the right tool set, that they could make everything all right. And I think that right now with, I think from their perspective, they look at the tool set that they have, where they have to push money, print money and push it through the likes of JP Morgan. It's very inefficient. And instead, and also relying on Congress to pass, laws. It's just complicated. They can't get the money in the right places as easily. But with the central bank digital currency, where they can literally down to the individual using, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and just basic behavioral economics on an individual level, they can really drive the kinds of economic solutions they think would work. And I don't think it'll work at all. I think it's terrifying, but I think that they sincerely believe it'll be a better solution, better than what they have today.
I agree. Take immediate and direct control. And since everybody has a cell phone where they can access their Fed account, but what about people that don't have cell phones? What happens if you lose your cell phone and can't afford to buy a new one? Of course, that's not much of an excuse, because I guess you can get a smartphone for $100 now, one way or another. But oh well.
Ultimately, we end up with the chip, Doug. All you need is a little chip.
All you need is a chip. You can't lose that,
right?
Which is definitely a double-edged sword.
It is a double-edged sword, and it's very concerning. And I don't see how that isn't the obvious solution at some point.
What do we do about it, Matt? I mean, we can see it coming, but what do we do about it?
Well, I think a couple things that are interesting about it. One is that in order to really encourage the adoption of a central bank digital currency, it seems to me that it has to be presented as an answer, a solution to a problem, which means we probably are going to face some greater financial and economic turmoil in advance of that. So I think because it has to, it has to be for people to widely adopt it, it has to be a relief. It has to be of obvious benefit. And I think that, if you see the dollar really start to blow up, maybe the Fed isn't so stupid, and maybe maybe it isn't that they can't see that there isn't inflation. Maybe it isn't that they're just so academic and, rely on the statistics, certain statistics only to know that. Maybe they know. And maybe that part of it is, of course, I'm conspiracy minded and I know you're not, but maybe that they know what they're doing, and that in order to save the financial system, they have to first destroy the monetary system. And then you destroy the monetary system by people losing faith in the currency. And then you can have sort of a good solution that is the central bank digital currencies. So I think
that's a good point. It's like in Vietnam, we have to destroy the village in order to save it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's possible that that's it. And in which case, I think it just builds, it's another data point as to why you should really be hedging your bets from a risk standpoint about the markets and about the current currencies and everything else, because I really think that turmoil is coming, whether it's, incited by the Fed or if it's just accidental. But it seems like that's certainly coming. So I think preparing for that, however that means for you individually, is one part of it. The other part is I think you have to disassociate as much as possible from these systems of control. So as much as you can, we live in such a complex society where we are reliant on people we have never met doing jobs we can't fathom in order to make our existence possible. And I think the more that we can reduce that dependency on all of these unknowns, the better off we'll be. So if you have, obviously, if you have resources of some kind, that's great. That helps. I mean, I guess for each individual, that depends on what you should do. But I think fundamentally, trying to put yourself in a position where you're less dependent upon these systems, so that you'd be less affected when these systems sort of work against you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, uh, been riding around for the last couple of days in a brand new Lincoln Navigator, or is it what they call an Aviator? Uh, but it's a giant Lincoln SUV. And one thing I've noticed about this car, talking about complicated and advanced systems, is that absolutely everything in that car runs on chips and solenoids. In other words, you don't even mechanically open the door anymore. You push
Right.
a button to open the door. And I'm saying to myself, this is actually getting a little bit out of control, where you can't even open the door by pulling a lever. You have to push a button. But wait a minute, what if this chip goes bad, or can't I get out my door? I can't crawl out the window, because of course it's an electric window, which I don't mind, but I'm thinking about the next car I buy. Perhaps I will retro rock to the 1960s and get a car which doesn't have all this stuff, but was perfectly satisfactory and fun to drive.
Yes, I think I told you I got a 1964 Dodge Power Wagon pickup truck. I think I might have mentioned that I bought one of those just because I wanted something there wasn't anything in it that was electronic.
Yeah, exactly. And if something goes wrong with a car of that vintage, I can actually fix it. I actually, know how it works. But with today's cars, just taking the covering off the top of the engine almost requires special tools and absolutely diagnostics if you're going to do anything with it. Does it
Yep.
run better? Yeah, while it runs. But when it stops running, you're SOL. I,
Right.
I don't know what the answer is, really. I mean,
But I think that's what explains the reliance on these complex systems, though, because a car is it's something that, if there's a problem, you assume there's a catastrophic failure. That catastrophic failure of that car is a local event. Okay. Meaning you're going to know when it's not working, at least. But you could have supply chain breakdowns. The gas pipeline that broke down, that was supposedly hacked, and cut off gas supply to the East Coast for a number of days, it's not a localized event where you can even see the problem occurring. You're just a beneficiary or victim of it functioning properly. And I think as much as you can reduce that reliance on those systems, the better off you'll be, or at least create a little buffer. I mean, it's the kind of thing where, you know, I've always had maybe inspired by some of my old Mormon friends, that they've always had like a year's worth of food in their house. And I thought it was ridiculous at first. And, I don't know, maybe a decade ago or 15 years ago, I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to have a month. Why not? Like, does it hurt anything to have it? And it doesn't protect me from systems failing, but what it does is it makes it when there's a problem of some kind, I have a little buffer from it. It's not going to affect me directly. If there's a when the power went out in Texas and all the grocery stores were they shut down the grocery stores because they couldn't resupply them with trucks anyway. There was ice all over. It was pretty bad. But a lot of people have become accustomed to going to the grocery store every day. So if you have to go to the grocery store every day in order to be able to eat, then your reliance on these complex systems is much greater than if you only had to go once a week. You know what I mean? So it's just trying to put a little buffer between the complex systems in your own life. It seems to be the obvious thing that everybody can do. There is no silver bullet, though, of course, in solving any of these problems.
well, perhaps it'll be simplified when Ted Turner or Bill Gates get their way, and or I guess all these people, and the population of the planet is reduced by 50 to 90%. Well, anything's possible, of course.
So let me run a couple of other news items by you here before we wrap up. And this, I guess I'd put these all in the category of distortions, government-based distortions. And right now, Colorado announced that yesterday that they plan to pay unemployed people up to $1,600 to return to work.
That really is rich. I mean, first of all, you can't work. You're actually not allowed to work for all kinds of reasons to do with the COVID hysteria. Now they got to pay people to get, it's one thing after another. It's like, it's always something. It's a new control.
Yep. And these things are that we like. I mean, I think in the US, we prefer incentives, the carrot over the stick with most things. I mean, I really think it's, for the general population, it's carrots. We pay people not to work. Now we need to get them to go to work a little bit. So we're bribing them to go back to work and off unemployment. I think that, the adopted central bank digital currency, a big part of it beyond a collapse will be, hey, there's like airdrops of money here. We're not going to put it in your Wells Fargo account, but we'll put it in your Fed account.
Well, it's so funny. Everybody laughed and joked about Bernanke when he said, hey, if we have to, we can dump money from helicopters. And everybody thought he was just making an outrageous joke, but it's actually happening. And I'll tell you the thing that's really disturbing about this. It's that in the past, if you decided to work or not work, it was between you and your employer. Now it's between you and the government. So that people don't talk about, me and whoever I'm working with or for. It's the government decides we're going to do this. We're going to pay you if you don't work. The government has inserted itself as a necessary third party in between two individuals. Like it used to be, if you had a health problem, a medical problem, you'd go to your doctor. It was between you and your doctor. That's how you solve the problem. Now it's between you and the government. I mean, nobody seems to notice this. This is a giant change, but nobody's noticed this giant change.
You're right. The last topic I wanted to get your thoughts on is that is the incentives that are out there from states to get people to take the vaccine. And when it was announced a couple of weeks ago that Ohio was going to offer if you got a vaccine, they were going to basically put your name in a hat as a lottery winner, where you could win up to $1 million. And I believe they were 4 people that that they gave it to. And when people saw that, a lot of people said, who were kind of skeptics of the government, and looked at it and said, this shows how desperate they are, how desperate the government is, that they would do something like this in order to try and get people to get vaccines. And I thought, this sounds like a good advertising test. That's the way I thought about it. I said, this does not mean desperation to me at all. As somebody who's done a lot of marketing in my life, I looked at it and I go, this is the way you would, start to explore the boundaries about what actually works effectively in the market. And it turns out that in Ohio, in the subsequent days, the vaccinations increased by 28%. It worked. It got people to do it. And so now they're rolling that out in New York and Maryland as well.
Well, first of all, why does some governor why does he have any interest on getting the people in his bailiwick vaccinated? I mean, most of these governors don't even know the chemical formula for water or know anything at all about medicine or chemistry or physics. So why are they so enthusiastic to have this done? Because this whole idea, not only of the importance of COVID, but of the importance or necessity or non-necessity of a vaccine is extremely controversial. So why are they so wild to have to have people do all these things. Once again, it goes back to the fact that it's not between you and your doctor anymore, or you and your common sense, or you and your own investigation of the problem, but it's you and your local elected politician. So it's all quite crazy.
Mhm.
And the fact they're using a lottery for it, I mean, it means they're really serious about getting everybody to take the vaccine. And using a lottery, I would expect that that would work best in kind of low-life states where people live in trailer parks and buy lottery tickets, which incidentally are about the worst deal that you can have. You know, people used to make fun of the numbers racket, where the mob used to run the numbers racket. I guess they still do in major cities. And the mob used to take 1/3 of the numbers. In other words, they'd take a 33% rake. But if you want to gamble, you should use the mob's number racket over the government's lottery. Why do I say that? Because the payout on the mob's number racket is much better than a government lottery. Government lotteries typically only pay out like 50 cents on the dollar. The mob pays out like 65 cents on the dollar, point number one. Point number two, if you hit the number with the mob, it's tax-free income. If you hit the number in the government's lottery, you're going to pay another 30 or 40 or 50% in income taxes. So it's really stupid. So this whole idea of using a lottery and integrating gambling with the medical system is especially goofy and perverse.
It's really weird. I'm trying to think if has there ever been any government initiative that used incentives like this? You know, and I do think the lottery one, like you said, is like, it's well known that, you know, it's just this dumb financial move to ever play the lottery. It seems like that's well known. And so it's less sophisticated people who do it. I mean, it's not, you know, it's not generally the highly educated or the financially independent who are playing the lottery. I mean, so it's like they're going after using a set of incentives to go after a certain subset of the population they feel like they're missing somehow. But has there ever been anything the U.S. has done where we have provided incentives like this to, you know, just to prod people into some sort of socially useful behavior?
Well, to start with, the government shouldn't be in a position to provide incentives or disincentives for anything. Purpose of a government is to protect you from coercion and violence within the society. It has nothing to do with providing incentives to do something. They can only do it by taking money away from other people to social engineer what you or other people do. So the whole thing is perverse.
No doubt. But are there examples of this? Have you ever seen anything like this before? Anything like this at all?
Where they're inducing you to do something by giving you something. Well, that's a good question. Can you think of anything?
I can't. I mean, the big social engineering thing that was done when I was growing up was like the anti-littering campaigns, which were very, very effective. You know, because I remember as a kid, people would litter all the time. I remember driving down the highway and, you know, my dad just dumped all our garbage off the dashboard out of the window. Like, that's just how you got rid of the garbage, you know? And like now I'm literally physically incapable of littering. I can't do it because I have been conditioned, socially engineered, if you will, to like that it's a bad thing. And I mean, really, I can't do it. So
you're violating property rights, because when you throw something out the window, I mean, it might land on somebody's private property, which is offensive. Or
it certainly makes everything in the world less beautiful anyway if people do it. But I think that there was clearly social engineering happening with that. in schools, the school programs that they had for us. I remember them. And like this sort of rampant littering just stopped with my generation. And now you see it littering again. And I think a lot of the, Latin Americans, which did not get the brainwashing, honestly, that we got, coming north. But there weren't incentives for that. People weren't bribed certainly there was threats, there were fines assessed for littering, if you littered, if you got caught, but there weren't incentives.
Yeah, I guess Latin Americans don't feel that way because the national flag of many third world countries ought to be a plastic bag, because there are so many thousands of them all over the landscape in these countries. But yeah, actually, there's something beyond that. Next was smoking. It's, nobody smokes now because it's considered to be kind of offensive in the same way as littering is.
Yeah.
And I understand the argument that can be made for that. I mean, if somebody's near you, maybe they don't like to, you're putting your smoke in their air. I understand that. And it's not good for your health. That seems to have been adequately proven. But it's the same type of thing where the government is, yeah, okay, so it's good, but maybe the government ought to encourage people to smoke because they generate tax revenue, which does them good, and it kills people earlier, which also does them good because then they're not going to have to be on Medicare or Medicaid so long too.
Yep.
Maybe the incentives will change strictly because of economics with the government.
Maybe
Forget about itself.
Maybe, but again, with both of those things, there wasn't the financial incentive. It definitely didn't seem like, maybe the behavioral economics had not really been well adopted or understood yet, but they're really using a lot of great marketing, which great marketing leverages behavioral economics in order to engineer this social change, or this, what they consider as socially beneficial in some way. And I just haven't seen anything like it before. I just think they've gotten a lot more sophisticated in their approach, and using these incentives works.
Yeah, it has. I mean, I'm thinking of other kind of national marketing campaigns, not necessarily with an incentive, but after 911, see something, say something became a big thing.
Mhm.
And nobody seemed to relate that to being a rat or a snitch, which is really what that's all about. That's another example of that. And of course, the most recent of all things is this hysteria with wearing masks, where now that, the word has gone out, you don't have to wear masks anymore. People are still wearing masks when they walk down the street all by themselves. So they're easily influenced. But the point you made is offering a financial incentive, a lottery, to get people to do something they wouldn't ordinarily do. I'll bet they're going to try this in other ways. I wonder what'll be next.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It'll be, I don't know. It'll be interesting though, but this is something that is like a watershed, I think, in the propaganda efforts of the government. I think something has changed in their approach, and I think it's effective.
Yeah, where will they use it next? And for what it's worth, just like the people that win the lottery, or at least the type of people that are dumb enough to play the lottery that against all odds win it, it destroys their lives. They win $1 million, and well, first of all, a couple of years later, they don't have the million, they've pissed it away, but they usually wind up even worse off because they've used that to leverage a lot of debt. So they wind up with nothing, not even their pitiful trailer home. I wonder if this COVID lottery will have the same effect.
Oh, I have to imagine. And I just think as a general rule, you just never, ever accept money from the government. And I know that there are a lot of people that say that that when, if they're offering it for free, you should take it. They have these PPP loans that, I have businesses that were eligible for it. And I was just like, I just feel like it's a huge mistake to ever take it, because first of all, you're entering into an agreement. You're receiving benefit from them for that agreement, and they can change the terms of the agreement at any point. saying, we gave you the money though. You did participate voluntarily. So now you're kind of in it. And I just think it perverts your own conduct if you accept the money. And so, I haven't qualified for any of the, the stimmy checks or anything like that, but I guarantee you, I would never cash it. I'd send it back. I want nothing to do with it. And I feel like it just perverts the mind in many ways. I know they've, and I almost convinced myself to do some of the PPP loan stuff because they're like, well, the loans will be forgiven. It's not gonna, it seems like it's free money, which of course that's a good clue. It's a problem. There's no such thing as free money. But I just think, and I thought to myself, well, hey, it's been a one-way street my entire life. I just send them money. I get nothing, no benefit in return, what's a little bit to help my company, but I think it's a huge mistake. And I don't want a damn thing from them, and I'm not going to take it.
Well, that is the honorable attitude. And whenever the government is passing stuff out like that, it is at somebody else's expense, and it's naturally corrupting. Even if somebody doesn't think about it the way you or I do, it's subtly corrupting to people that, think it's okay. I mean, the question is, look, the enemy out here is the state. The state is everybody's enemy, directly or indirectly, even if you appear to be a beneficiary for it. I think if what we're doing here has any real object or purpose, from my point of view, it would be to get people to think about the fact that the state, the government, is not their friend. It's actually their enemy. And people never think of it in those terms.
They don't. And I think it's because they don't read history. Like they read the Gulag Archipelago, about what happened in Russia and later the Soviet Union. Read a little bit about what happened with Mao and the Cultural Revolution. And you see the state as a problem. And also, you got to get over this whole idea, well, the government's really only our enemy if the blue team is in charge. If the red team is in charge, we're fine. I think that it's totally irrelevant. Like whoever's in charge, they're still the enemy. I mean, they still look at you as you're a serf. You're like I said, a milk cow or or a beef cow, but you're a cow in their eye.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So that's the basic principle. That if people start thinking about that way, it'll alter their whole way of looking at the world at large. I'm not saying it's necessarily going to make them happier. Sometimes it's better to be fat, dumb, and happy. But,
yeah, right all the way through the feedlot, right up to the last moment where you get the bolt gun in the head.
that's right.
Well, on that happy note, I think we'll leave it there and wrap up for the weekend, Doug. But thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you then.